Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Senior College. On behalf of the committee and myself, I want to thank you for your registration and your great participation. Much appreciated. And to also let you know that the spring brochure will be in the mail and online in early January. Classes start the 1st of February, and we've got a great lineup for spring again. So we hope to see many of you at many classes next semester. And I also want to just mention the evaluation forms for any of you who aren't regulars at our classes. We do this every semester. They're for committee use only. As coordinator, I will do a summary. Ben gets a copy of that, and he gets a form to fill out on us too. And so that will be, he's already got that on his desk here. And we do look very carefully at your feedback and your suggestions for other topics, future instructors. So really do give us feedback, and we would like to be sure and get them before you leave today. So whenever you're done, but before you leave today. I'd like to, first of all, thank Eric and his colleagues from Coralville who I said to Eric a bit ago, I was a little hesitant when this first came up about this videotaping. I had all kinds of technical glitches in mind, but it's just been seamless. And so we really appreciate, and I don't know if you've looked at any of it online as yet, but they're beautifully produced, edited and produced. And the last session and this session will be on as soon as they're ready. He'll have them on the Coralville site. So I want to thank them, and also they've done the setup of the chairs for us, so that's been great. And I want to thank my committee colleagues who've been back here and, handing stuff out and moving tables and all that good stuff with us. And certainly then to thank Ben for a wonderful, informative, class. He said he had a little trepidation when I first contacted him about doing this. I told him you don't bite. It's been informative and entertaining, and today he's going to tell us what happened and why, and maybe make some prognostications.
All right. Wow, that's a tall order to fill. Thank you, Bea. It's been a real joy to be with you. This is the 4th session, and I did have trepidation when Bea asked me about that. And well, I guess a Bob Dylan lyric, since he's now a Nobel Prize winner, popped into my head. It ain't me, babe. If I could think of a song title, something like that. But I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. It's been a complete pleasure to me to mix with you, to get your opinions. And the joy I find is picking people's brains about their ideas, the guests that we've had here, but also to talk to you, members of my community, about what you think and the vast experience that you have and wisdom that you have. And that's a real joy for me. So thank you, Bea, for asking me on behalf of the committee. Please tell the committee thank you for the invitation. I hope there's something else I can do in the future. So for this session, some of it's just going to be tossed to the side. I'm not sure. We'll see how things go. I work in live radio. Sometimes you take your game plan and you wad it up and you throw it in the garbage can. And you just go with what feels right. So do jazz players, I've heard. Frank Conroy used to be the head of the Writers' Workshop, and he was always, before you interview someone, you like to get a feeling for if you're on the same page, generally speaking. You want the conversation to be spontaneous, but sort of in bullet points or outline, okay, if we talk about this, this, and this, and this. And I had my ideas, and I was, of course, completely in awe of Frank Conroy, as many of us were. And I went to him, and I approached him, and to every question I asked, if we could talk about that point, it would be, if it feels right, Ben. If it feels right. Of course, Frank Conroy, a great jazz player as well. So that went along with his jazz personality. B is handing out question cards, so we hope you'll put great questions on. For Donna Hoffman is our guest for this last session. We'll be joining her in about 25 minutes from her office at the University of Northern Iowa in Cedar Falls. Yesterday, she came here to Iowa City to be in our studio, and we did about four plus hours of live election coverage, followed the last night, as many of you did as well. A reminder, this is on Coralvision, broadcast live right now, but if you'd like to see it later, just Google Coralvision, and you'll find the YouTube channel for that. So, yeah, that being said, I wanted to go to a lot of processing to do about the results yesterday. And I think especially in this room, you are sitting in one of 6 counties of the 99 that voted for Hillary Clinton. And knowing from the survey that I gave you the first session, about 80% of you voted for Hillary Clinton. So some disappointment, to put it mildly here, last night when the results came in. A surprise in so many ways to pollsters. A lot of, as Dennis Goldford said on my program just a little while ago on Iowa Public Radio, everybody will be looking at their navels. A lot of navel gazing. Pollsters, the Democratic Party, the Republican Party. We will see how it unfolds in the next few weeks. I thought this, though, might be a good opportunity, because even though we determined the very first session that your political profile collectively stretches back to voting even for Eisenhower, okay? So many elections behind you. Have we ever experienced an election like this? We talked about 1968, the riots in Chicago. Someone in this room actually was in Chicago during those riots. We talked about Watergate, 1972. We mentioned, in the late 60s, the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., Bobby Kennedy, and so forth. So here we're reminded that history visits us as well, and we can have politics that aren't sort of variations of gray, a little grayer, a little lighter gray, a little darker gray. But I'm pulling this picture up because I was going to say, where is this? But of course, it's on the tab up there. This is Berlin, 1989. That's yours truly in my mid-20s when I first went to Berlin, to remind us that, this kind of political tumult happens around the world all the time. We're very lucky to live in a very stable democracy. This is in '89, a couple months before the wall fell. My wife and I visited that. She was then my girlfriend. And this is, of course, the Berlin Wall. Behind that, the Reichstag. And those are some of the crosses. It's disputed, but approximately 130 people lost their lives trying to escape from East Berlin from when the time the wall existed, 61 through 89. And then in 89, I'm here, this is in the summer of 89, I believe. At the time, if you remember the name Mikhail Gorbachev and Glasnost, the opening, on the weekend that I was here, on the weekend that this photo was taken, actually Gorbachev was in East Berlin, reminding the then leader of East Germany, Erich Honecker. I think his famous quote from that weekend was, "History punishes those who come too late." very prophetic, because history did happen then a little while later. When the wall came down, I'll show you a few other pictures. That is my wife when I met her. Just as lovely as she was then is she now living here. If you run into her, you can say, I saw you by the Berlin Wall. So we happened to see my name there on the Berlin Wall, spray painted. Indeed, some nice times. Peter Jennings was there with all the networks once the wall fell. All the networks there. It was funny. If you were watching American television when this happened, behind they had all their stages built. Behind those stages were not Germans. They were all Americans, because the Americans in Berlin were the only ones who recognized people like Peter Jennings and Dan Rather and Tom Brokaw. There I am again with the star on my shoulder interviewing. That's the then mayor of Berlin, Walter Momper. I forget the BBC fellow who's standing next to me there. There's the Berlin Wall and the zone, the no man's land there, and you would be killed if you would cross that. One particular moment along the theme that, politics and great political moments don't just happen here in the United States, but they happen in other places. I was standing all night when I arrived there. I went immediately on a train from Cologne to Berlin when I heard the wall was opening. And stood in a field outside in Potsdamer Platz. It's now a huge area with a lot, you wouldn't recognize it. But anyway, in a rainy field pretty much all night, while you could hear, with a crowd of other people, while you could hear the East Berliners working on the wall to dismantle it. And by daybreak, they did dismantle it, and by that time on the west side of Berlin, a great number of people, a crush of people had gathered. And somehow the Dutch, they're so efficient. I don't know how they did this. They had trucked in tulips, truckloads of tulips, and gum, packages of gum, and bananas. They knew this was a scarcity in East Berlin, because the East Germans had no way to get to some of those countries where bananas are grown. So daylight breaks. The first chunk of the wall is removed, big enough, and then people start coming through the wall. East Berlin people. I remember one couple, somewhere in the neighborhood of perhaps your age, had never known really anything except the wall, or perhaps from when they were young people. A man and a wife. Both pushing bicycles up to the wall, the crowd ushering them on. You can come to the west, and they paused at the wall, even though it was open, as if there was something invisible that would stop them from coming into the west. The woman looked very worried, looking up at her much larger husband, one of these large, stoic Germans. Very broad shoulders, right? The woman looks very fragile and scared. The man very stoic. This will be fine. They figured they could walk through this barrier now that had been in place for nearly 30 years. And thousands on the other side. I was one of the thousands going like this. And they paused, and then they moved into West Berlin. The woman smiled, and the man broke down in tears. Completely. That's my memory. You see, I still get a bit choked up about that. We'll move along a little bit. This woman is an organ grinder who remembers the Weimar Republic of the 1930s. One of the few people I interviewed there who remembered democracy in Berlin and could talk to me about it. Okay, I think those are all my pictures. Weeks later, I went to Prague. There they had the Velvet Revolution. I stood on a balcony with a BBC reporter and looked at 300,000 people below me. And their Velvet Revolution came in a series of the government would give a little bit, and then the compromise was not good enough for the people, and they would come again to Wenceslas Square and demonstrate for further freedoms. And that's when I saw politics at work on a street level, literally. Below me were an estimated 300,000 people. You think Kinnick Stadium is loud on football Saturday. So there's 300,000 people singing one song, their national anthem. Okay. That's what came to mind for me today throughout the week as we look at the political results. I want to get, before I could show the videos from IPTV on past caucus, but I thought there would be some feelings, some thoughts that you would like to share right now about yesterday. And we have to keep in mind for anybody also watching this on the internet, we took that poll, 80% of you are very disappointed today. Some of you are very happy because your candidate won, but you are in a minority in this county, in this room, I would highly suspect. Tell us a little bit, what are your thoughts? You have long histories. You've seen a lot of things. Do you have hope? Does this create anxiety? What kind of anxiety? Will this pass? Does it feel like it won't pass? Does it feel like you don't know Iowa? Do you don't know the country you live in? Do you feel this is a great new start for the country? Okay, I think B's going to get over there to you because I don't want to throw this microphone thing out of whack.
I'm not sure I'm ready to say what's going to happen. What has struck me today was how gracious and well said President Trump's speech, and then listen to Hillary's speech on Constellation. And I thought, if this had been reversed and Trump had won the popular election and Hillary had won the electoral college, what would have happened then? Would he have been quite as gracious as he was as the new president-elect? Or would he have started screaming about, it's rigged?
Well, we had a good indication of that when he promised to accept the outcome of the election if he won.
Yeah, right.
So the hypothetical on the other side we don't experience, do we? Who else has a thought to share about what happened yesterday?
Well, for a few minutes, I was shocked, just plain shocked. And then I became very worried because I had read that some number of years ago there was a couple of people who were working towards having the United States an oligarchy, and I think that we just started it this year. Especially in the state of Iowa, we're no longer have anybody to block anything that the Republicans want to do. Mm-hmm. And it's true in the national. There aren't enough Democratic senators to do any blocking of anything. So I'm very concerned over the fact that our country has only one, can go whatever way they want to do, this particular party. So I am very worried.
Is there anything that you experienced in the last few hours since the results have been known that give you some hope, that reduce your anxieties?
Not really.
No.
I will say this, I thought Hillary did a magnificent job because I know how hard she worked for this particular thing. And it's a shame. I also think, too, that there is a big backlash about having women and blacks in office. And it was pretty much a white supremacy takeover. And I'm really embarrassed for our country for that reason.
Other views, other thoughts, reactions to the very fresh election results, 2016. Donald Trump, as of what I just checked a few moments ago, I think some electoral votes being determined. Hillary Clinton with 228, Donald Trump with 279. Yeah, please, sir.
I think it'll be interesting and important for us to see what, if anything, develops from the WikiLeaks Russian connection and whether that in fact did affect things in this process.
You think there may be investigations? Who
Well,
knows?
I certainly hope so. I mean, the allegations have been out there.
Investigations are led by the party in power. Right? So might not get your hopes up too high on that one, but maybe I'm wrong.
Can I speak?
Yes, please.
I was outraged this morning when I heard Trump's speech saying that we owe Hillary a great debt of service for all the things that she's accomplished. After all the months and months of his saying that he was going to put her in jail if possible. It was such a hypocritical statement and really made me mad.
Getting reactions from our class here at the Coralville Public Library. Yes, sir.
I thought the roller coaster of the Dow Jones being down 800 points at midnight and up 215 by early this afternoon, I just was really shocking and maybe reflected the roller coaster that we're on to see the Dow do that. And the futures were down the maximum for a little bit, and then this morning
Right.
everything was well again.
It was after it was digested, I think. Yeah, we've got down here at the end. John, yeah.
I was stunned, as many were, such a surprise. I'm interested to know what the polling companies are going to do about their methodology in the future.
Right.
I have mixed feelings on the outcome. On the one hand, I had very positive feelings about 4 speeches. One speech was Donald Trump's acceptance speech at the Republican National Committee, when I put myself deliberately into the mindset of his supporters. The other 3 speeches were the ones we've just seen and heard. Trump's victory speech, which, taking just the words and the tone of voice, not trying to impute motives or anything else, just the words and the way in which they were delivered, I was encouraged.
Right.
I felt optimistic. Then Hillary's speech, very gracious. And I have to say Donald Trump's speech was gracious also. And then President Obama's speech, also very well. The mixed feelings on the negative side, hearing Paul Ryan speak just before coming over here, reminding us that the Republican majority now is in a position to repeal all of the things that most Democrats support, whether it's health care, whether it's the protections for the environment, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll see.
We'll see. Good observations on that, because we have this tradition in the U.S. of binding up our wounds that we create during our election campaigns. Some really big, raw wounds at this point here, too. Yes, over there, please.
Yeah, I think, the last speaker I agree with. I was absolutely stunned that the polls were so inaccurate. I just can't figure out how they could possibly have been that wrong.
I think we'll get some answers from Donna Hoffman in just a moment, but yeah.
And the other thing is I really am disappointed in the press overall through this whole thing. Donald Trump, I can't tell you how many headlines were on the New York Times every single day that had to do with him, regardless of whatever he was doing. And they were always right at the top. And the Washington Post, to some extent, too. I just think the press really needs some self-reflection.
So the alternative would have been, because Donald Trump, and I have in my bag here, it's from Politico, 155 of the craziest things, that's their headline, the craziest things Donald Trump said during this campaign. The way our press works is if something is out of line, outrageous, crazy in quotation marks, that makes news. So you're actually telling This is just my reaction to your comment, and I understand your criticism, and a lot of people have that criticism. You're asking the media to respond like a different animal than it is. It is there to, and remember, many in the media thought, oh, this is the outrage that will sink the ship. So the media is there to report on what Donald Trump said. He said all these things. All right? I don't know. It'll be a debate, and I'm sure, the media has and we can't treat it as a monolith, can we? Because the media are many different things. There are media with political purposes on each side of the aisle, and then there are media trying to, deliver a lot of different perspectives. We've got time for maybe one or two more before we join Donnie. Yes, sir.
As it happens, I'm in the middle, about halfway through, reading a brand new biography of Herbert Hoover, which I think I was the first one to get it out of the Iowa City Library, but I have to give it back. And somebody else has it on hold, but I recommend it. It's very, very good. But where I am is in his presidency, and of course, poor Hoover never really quite recovered in terms of reputation, despite the fact that I think probably he is probably the brightest and most capable president we've ever had, except maybe for Jefferson. But he had to deal with an incredible Congress, a broken Republican Party. Does any of this sound familiar? However bad we may be feeling at the moment, I think it's true that, at least in many respects, we've been here before. Mm-hmm. And we managed to survive, and we will survive this one.
Good observation. We have been to deep division in this country before we were born, for sure.
I just want to share with you that I have a granddaughter who's 18, senior in high school. She didn't want to go to school today. She's devastated.
Mm-hmm. I spoke with a young woman this morning in her 20s, going to college. She said, I can't have kids. She meant it in tears. Not because she can't have kids biologically. She says, I can't have kids here.
I feel very strongly for the young people in our country that we have been working so hard in school systems against bullying. And to me, a bully won.
Mm-hmm. We have any people here speaking up for Donald Trump? Because there's certainly plenty of people who voted for him. This state didn't go to Donald Trump without people voting for him.
Well, as one of the minority here,
mm-hmm.
what I feel today is just less dread than I would have felt if Hillary Clinton had won.
Why less dread? Because explain that, yeah.
I have this goofy attachment to the Bill of Rights, and she just plain hates it.
Okay.
She has,
I think that needs to be defended. On what basis do you say that?
I say that because one of her main goals was to suppress political speech. She was talking about, by trying to overturn Citizens United, and if necessary, even to amend the First Amendment so that Congress could control campaign expenditure.
Okay. We're just letting people kind of speak their minds. In any one of these answers, and that's where in my job, what I do, you can drill down on anybody's particular answer and ask for evidence. We're asking for reactions right now. That's a valid reaction. Even if it's not, you don't think it's evidence-based. We're going to join Donna Hoffman here right now. I think we'll have time later on. If you have your cards with your question, please, if I can have my help, bring that forward so that we can ask Donna Hoffman some questions. I'm going to maximize this. Boy, I'm getting so good at this technology. I hope I dialed up the right person. Hey, it looks like
Hey.
the right person. Hi, Donna.
Long time no see, Ben.
Donna was, I'll turn you around here, Donna, so that you can see who you're speaking to briefly, and we can ask them to wave and say hi to Donna Hoffman in the University of Northern Iowa. And we have a class here, a few away, but we were having a discussion here. We started off the session, Donna, with just talking about sort of reactions to this and about political upheaval. And this is the closest we've had to political upheaval in a long time in the United States. I was recalling my time living in Germany during the fall of the Berlin Wall and what came after that, and covering the revolution in Prague. So just to make the point that, we have a real stable democracy, but even we have upheaval, and we have really raw nerves among the losers here after this election. So Donna Hoffman, we'll have questions from the audience for you in just a moment, but you've had a few hours to think this over since we were in the studio together for about 4 hours yesterday as the results came in. Make sense of it for us right now. What conclusion? What conclusion? Yes. You've had a few hours. No.
I've had 3 hours of sleep. Let me just put in there.
We're about even there. Okay.
Yeah. Just as an opening, I'll tell you, the Berlin Wall fell on November 9th, 1989, and yesterday was November 9th. Or today is November 9th, actually. Sorry. So close.
I didn't even realize that. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Very good.
So maybe there's some, I don't know, symbiosis there. But so one of the things I did today was teach class, and I have a legislative politics class. And so pretty uniformly, the students were pretty down and dejected about the results of the election. College campuses tend to skew a little more liberal. This one's probably a little less so than the one in the area where you are, but I kind of felt like I had to talk them off the cliff in some respects. So we talked a little bit about the election results, and these are very unusual election results in a lot of ways. And so let's kind of go through how they are unusual. So Hillary Clinton's going to win the popular vote. That seems pretty clear. Last time I checked a little bit earlier this afternoon, she was up by 210,000 in the popular vote, and that still tends to be going her way in that regard. To put that into kind of some perspective, Gore in 2000 won the popular vote by 540,000, and he didn't win the presidency, obviously. Now, 2000 was a bit different because you had the dispute over how to count Florida. And the popular vote's not important in the sense that it doesn't elect the president, and we all need to understand that. The Electoral College does, and Donald Trump has won that fair and square, and there's not even a court that's intervening in this particular case. So Hillary Clinton has won the popular vote, and symbolically that's important. There's no way that the Trump administration can claim that there is a mandate there, for example, but they certainly may claim that, because even in 2000, Karl Rove claimed for George W. Bush that they had a mandate even after they lost the popular vote. So it's politics in that sense. But Senate Republicans lost 2 seats. It looks like 2 seats. They've definitely lost Illinois, and it looks like they are picking up New Hampshire. And they got to keep Nevada, which was one of the ones that the Democrats really wanted to keep, and they did. Now, if this had been a regular year, and what I mean by a regular year is if we look at presidential election years and look at the president's party that wins the presidency and how they perform in the Senate, a regular year, we would have expected the party winning the presidency to pick up 2.5 seats. The Republicans are going to lose 2 seats in that regard. So they're going to have a smaller margin. The new margin's likely going to be 52 Republicans to 48 Democrats, and that includes the 2 independents that caucus with the Democrats. The previous margin was 54 to 46, and that's below 60, it's important to note. And so while there's unified control in terms of the presidency, in terms of the Senate, in terms of the House of Representatives, the Republicans do not have a filibuster-proof margin, and that does have some consequences. Now, there are some things you can do, like reconciliation with a bare majority, and there are aspects of Obamacare that initially were passed by reconciliation. the Republicans could undo some of the aspects of that through reconciliation. We'll have to see how that plays out. But that does put a brake in some ways on some of the things that can be done in the Senate. The House Republicans also lost seats. And they are going to lose, there's 3 races still out. They're going to lose, it looks like, about 6 seats. Now, if it was a regular year, again, when I say regular year here, I mean the president's party picking up seats in the House, we would have expected 16 seats to be picked up by the Republicans here, and they're going to end up losing 6. And so the new margin is going to be approximately 241 to 194. And that's, I mean, the House is majoritarian, so if you're the majority, it's great days for you in the House. So, so you have to put this election into context. I think some of the initial reaction was wow, this was really surprising. Donald Trump triumphs. I think that was the headline for both the New York Times and the Washington Post this morning. Yes, but that he wins the presidency, but we're still very much a divided country. The Republican Party itself is still very much divided. And that has implications for going forward and for governing and for what can be done.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to follow up on that. I think you were heading there right with that last comment. Given that the Republican Party was not entirely on board Trump's train during the campaign, especially none of the congressional members here in Iowa in the GOP, but for instance in neighboring Nebraska, Ben Sass, very much against Donald Trump, a never-Trumper. How does that go forward? When we talk about, do Republicans then just get on board with the president? What do you anticipate there in trying to find a unified agenda among the Republicans?
I think it will be really quite interesting. Will the Trump administration be vindictive in terms of the Never Trump people? Will they lock them out? Will they seek to heal those wounds? And I don't know. I mean, Trump's personality has shown itself to be somewhat vindictive, I think.
He says in his book, someone hits you, you hit him back 10 times harder. I think that's a definition of vindictive. What we'll see.
We'll see, but presidents are tempered by the people around them,
right,
in many respects, and and we saw that in the course of the campaign when his handlers made him stay on task, use a teleprompter. Mm-hmm. He was much less bombastic. He was much less a loose cannon in that sense. So it will be really important to watch the people that he picks around him. And we also know that he doesn't have a lot of expertise. This election is historic. It was historic whether we elected Hillary Clinton, the first female president, or whether we elected Donald Trump. He is the first person we have ever elected in this country who has had neither government experience, elected government experience, nor military command, basically. And that's historic. And the way that you do a business is not the same way that you govern. And the way that you campaign is not the same way that you govern as well. And the people around him have to realize that, and they're going to have to make Donald Trump realize that as well. And so in terms of the way that the party tries to put itself back together, I don't have a lot of insight in that, but just because they won doesn't mean that those fissures in the party automatically go away. And so we'll see what the strategy is. And you still could have a rump Republican movement within the party that seeks to come back another time. I mean, you could still have the party splitting in the next election. What will we know about 2018, for example? It's a midterm election. The Republicans should lose massive seats in the House and the Senate because that's the pattern in terms of midterm losses for the president's party. So I think there will be some interesting dynamics. But I mean, certainly I think Donald Trump will be given a chance to see what he can do in terms of governing.
Okay, and just like President Obama had in his first 2 years, he had a Democratic House and a Senate for the first 2 years. So this will be, Donald Trump would serve him well to move fast and to get the top part of his agenda through here. I didn't mention your title here, Donna Hoffman, is department head and associate professor of political science at the University of Northern Iowa, author of, this is from a few years back, Addressing the State of the Union, the Evolution and Impact of the President's Big Speech. So Donna Hoffman, very much a presidential focus on her politics going back several years. We have a lot of questions here. Let me ask this one before. The people that I've talked to prior to the election and also since the election results came in, most worrying for some people is what was raised against him during the campaign, his temperament. That, okay, you've got these things like the Supreme Court, you've got the immigration, but you also have a special power of the president in that he can declare war, and we are a nuclear country. I guess a question, and I don't know if you know the answer, we have to talk to an expert here in the area. The president can do what if he gets mad? I mean, just to put it very simply, are there checks there?
Yes, there are. Now, we do talk about the paradoxes of the presidency, and Donald Trump is going to show us a lot of those. For example, we, as an electorate, seem to want to elect, somebody we'd like to have a beer with, or the common man, but yet we expect uncommon leadership from these people. That's one of the paradoxes that we see. Another of the paradoxes that we see here is that the president's really powerful, but then the president isn't really powerful. So, one of the problems with the way that Obama governed, because he was stymied so much by Congress, is he governed by executive order. The new president comes in and can eliminate those executive orders. And so there is a lot of power in terms of executive power where you can affect policy without Congress by using executive orders. And technically not an executive order, but one of the memos was the DACA program. So the deferred action basically it tried to accomplish the Dreamer Act without legislation because Congress wouldn't pass it. And I can't for the life of me remember what DACA stands for at the moment, but deferred action, a childhood arrivals, that's what it is, deferred action for childhood arrivals. So, and that actually expired in terms of that time period in that first memo. But, Donald Trump won't be doing anything there, and he can actually direct ICE to ramp up deportations, to change the priority in terms of how deportations are done. And, he even on the trail mentioned that he would have a deportation force. And I think some of this is hyperbole, but there are definite things that a president can do in this regard. Now, but yet the founders went to a lot of lengths to temper the power of the president. Unfortunately, in the modern age, some of those have eroded. And I'll use the example that you mentioned. Ben, you said the president can declare war. And actually, the Constitution is very clear that only Congress can declare war. Now, what has happened is that the president, it's also very clear the president's commander-in-chief. What has happened is that the president, because he has a standing military now and because we've become a global power, has that at his disposal, and he's the commander-in-chief. And so it's not the intended way the founders thought that power would work. They were very concerned about giving the president too much power. They put all of the power of the purse in Congress, even though the president plays a role in that in terms of legislation. But the war powers, they split up. They gave the power to declare war to Congress. That is the offensive power in their estimation. They gave the defensive aspect of this to the president. That's the commander-in-chief part of it. Over time, both of those have essentially drifted to the president, and we don't see Congress declaring war. And there's some very good reasons for this. So, for example, Korea is the first military action, if you will. I guess actually it's a police action after World War II. Well, the Cold War had started at that point. So who are we going to declare war on? If Congress was going to declare war in that police action, that was going to be another world war. So wisely, they didn't declare war. And on Korea, Congress neither authorized nor declared that. With most of the other military actions since that time, Congress has actually authorized it. And of course, Congress always has the power of the purse. So they have to pay for it. So, Donald Trump can say, I'm going to build a wall, I'm going to do various things, but he doesn't have the power of the purse. Congress does. Now, he has unified control of Congress, but there is separation of powers there for a very important reason. So, yeah, the president has power, but those powers are constrained, and the people can constrain those. Public opinion can constrain some of these things over time as well. And so, We do have a system that's pretty elaborate, that's actually very complex, and it was designed to be that way precisely so presidents would not gain too much power. Having said that, he is very authoritarian in the way that he approaches things, and there is room for mischief here in that regard. And then, Ben, I think you mentioned, in terms of the nuclear arsenal, that is obviously a concern. And we had some sound bites from Donald Trump in terms of, if we have these nuclear weapons, why don't we use them? Again, I think I would have a little bit of confidence in terms of the people around him, cooler heads prevailing in that kind of environment.
We have a question.
It's always troubling to give any one individual this kind of power, and that's one of the reasons why we have elections. But elections have consequences.
We have a lot of questions from our audience, and one just to that point, it says here, Donna, since Donald Trump is completely inexperienced, do you think the Republican leaders will do a lot to help him? Will they go along with some of his extreme positions? A wall, extreme deportation, writes this class member here. So the Republicans, I guess they're all in the same boat now. They want to help him succeed. Do some Republicans want to help him succeed? Do some want to block some of what they see as extremism? How are we to understand that?
Well, I think that the reason why you had some establishment Republicans get on board with Trump relatively early is because they saw him as malleable, and that he could be the vehicle for ushering them into office potentially on a wave of populist, nativist support, that then they could accomplish the agenda that they've had for a really long time. I'm thinking of Paul Ryan in particular. He's got this agenda in terms of the better way, that at the point he was kind of on the outs with Trump, he really was going around the country touting that as his own kind of agenda. I think that's a little bit dangerous to assume that a personality like Trump will do that. And again, he's not really a Republican in terms of what we have historically thought about the issue positions that he seems to profess. So, for example, he is, more protectionist in terms of trade policy. And the Republican Party historically has been a party that has touted free trade. This seems to have been one of the kind of key issues of the electorate in this cycle, this more protectionist feeling. One of the things that got some of the blue collar white working class on board in some ways. So how will the Republicans position themselves in this regard? And I think that's where you have kind of this uneasy alliance initially, and they're going to be feeling each other out. And then again, you have the rump Republicans, the never Trump people. We'll see what they will do. But I think that you have to really watch here in terms of what will Donald Trump do in terms of an agenda, because it's not real clear. He's been in a lot of different places with the things that he has talked about. And some of those things are kind of at odds with the Republicans. And infrastructure spending, for example, both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump talked about infrastructure spending. Republicans in Congress have not been all that willing to do those kinds of things. And so there's a potential point in which you could have a President Trump working with Democrats that then dismays the Republicans. So there will be some interesting dynamics there, I think.
Another question from our class for Donna. What would have happened, and this is a common question run into, what would have happened if Bernie Sanders would have been the nominee?
Well, just like Donald Trump really isn't a Republican, or I would kind of argue that as I was previously, Bernie Sanders isn't really a Democrat. He's a Democratic socialist. He participated in the Democratic Party caucus and primaries, but when he lost that nomination, he went back to the Senate, and he is still an independent in the Senate. He did not change his party affiliation, and his rationale was that the people of Vermont elected him as an independent, and so he would stay that way. And again, he had some positions that didn't fit neatly in terms of the Democratic Party, but he came in and did this. And so, interesting about the 2016 nomination contest is that both parties had significant elements in terms of their primary electorates that desired some kind of an outsider. And it was Bernie on the Democratic side. And on the Republican side, you actually had multiple people here. You had Ben Carson, you had Donald Trump, you had Carly Fiorina, you had Ted Cruz, who painted himself as an outsider, even though he was a senator. But all four of those people were really trying for that anti-establishment, blow it up, political experience is bad kind of thing. Bernie Sanders had that political experience, but he's been in Washington, but he's always been outside of that Democratic Party establishment. And so I don't know necessarily that Bernie Sanders would have been a better general election candidate than Hillary Clinton.
Let me put it to you this way. Dennis Goldford, who you've been on our program with before, put it, a caller on the program, my radio program, put it this way, asked the same question essentially, and Dennis said, no way. He said, at that point, you would have seen Donald Trump put a hammer and sickle on everything that was associated with Bernie Sanders and reawakened our Cold War fears. Mm-hmm. You agree with that?
Now, the socialism label, interestingly enough, for example, with my students, does not have the same connotations as it does for people of my age and older who, grew up in the Cold War or were adults in the Cold War. And so there has been actually some movement on that. But, that's correct. There's still an awful lot of people in the electorate that still have those connotations associated with that.
Mm-hmm. Here's a question going off in a different vein here. So many parts of this election that will be picked apart, analyzed, a lot of interesting things for you as a scholar of politics, Donna, to look at with your colleagues and do research on. Here's a question. Do you think that in the next 4 years, the media will become less biased? Now, interesting here, we don't know whether the questioner means less biased in a liberal way or a conservative way, because each side of the political spectrum claims that the press is biased. We certainly get emails at Iowa Public Radio. I get an equal number of mails that say you are way lefty liberal and you are way conservative. Why did you let that happen? From both sides here. So I guess the question here, maybe just the nature of the media we have today in this hyper-partisan atmosphere.
Well, the media environment has fundamentally changed. So, again, when I was growing up, and this is going to be true with, the people in your audience, I grew up in a rural area. We had an aerial antenna and we had 3 channels and PBS if the weather was right. And so we had ABC, NBC, CBS, and maybe PBS, and that was it. And you watched the 5 o'clock news. Everybody watched the same essential news. And there was the standard of objectivity. And then that began to change with cable television. And then you started to have networks that could cater. You could get around some of the federal regulations, and that could start to cater to various segments. And so, if you watch Fox News, we can probably say a lot about your ideology. If you watch MSNBC, we can probably say a lot about your ideology. Here's what I recommend, and this is what I practice in terms of my own life. If I ever turn on the television in the morning and occasionally I do this, but then it cures me for about 6 months. I turn on something like Morning Joe, which is on MSNBC. They talk over each other, they argue with each other, and it actually makes me uptight, and I turn it off. And I'm a political scientist. I don't watch television news. I listen to the radio. I read the newspapers, and I read things online. And again, you can have different sources, but I'm also a researcher, and I also understand the value of sources. And this is something that we really struggle with our students right now, is doing research and finding sources that are appropriate, because there is a lot of crap, quite frankly, on the internet that you can go to, and you can find any opinion to any document to back up the opinion that you already have. That doesn't mean it is a well thought out or a factually based or research based view. And students oftentimes today think, well, I saw it on the internet, so therefore it must be true. They try to write research papers without ever setting foot in a library, which you actually can do and do appropriately these days, because so much stuff is online, but you're just accessing print things that are online. But they don't always get the very big continuum in terms of quality and appropriateness of sources. And so they hear something, maybe it's 140 characters on Twitter, and then that becomes something that they believe in. And this is a real problem in terms of the electorate. Ben, when I was on the show at one point, relatively recently, somebody called in and you, I think, even said, well, but Donald Trump, if you go to fact check factcheck.com, the fact checker entities, Donald Trump has been rated, with 70% of his statements being utterly false, essentially. And, the caller just totally would not get that because that didn't fit into the frame of reference. And even on surveys, we saw at times that Hillary Clinton was seen as less trustworthy than Donald Trump, but she did much better on these metrics. What has come to happen in this country is just like we segregate ourselves in terms of I watch Fox and you watch MSNBC and never the twain shall meet. We live in those communities many times that are isolated. We only have dinner with people that think ideologically like we have and like we do. And if you have never if you're a liberal and you've never talked to a conservative, that's a problem. If you're a conservative and you've never talked to a liberal, that's a problem. And so we get into our little isolated sorted areas and we don't come out of those. And then we discount all information that doesn't confirm the biases that we already have. And this requires a lot of stopping and thinking. And again, this is what we strive to do with our students, to take something that you have and you think and with our students, many times it's something ideological that came from their parents. And then you say, okay, but go find me evidence of that and go find counter evidence of that. And let's analyze it and let's think about it critically. And then let's come to conclusions. And students really have a hard time with that. And part of it is the media environment. But the media is the media. How you consume it is really up to you. And at no other time in the history of the world have we had more access to information. Some of it's really bad, but some of it's really good. So you don't need to, when President Trump gives the State of the Union address, whenever he gives it, and the first year is typically not called one, but it'll be like that. You don't have to, you can watch it without commentary. You don't have to listen to the people that talk about it before and the people that talk about it afterwards. And you can read the transcript and you can come to your own conclusions about what was said there before you listen to, or maybe even instead of listening to, the various pundits and talking heads that come on television and tell you what you heard. Because you want to be able, as a citizen, to make those decisions yourself, to come to those conclusions on your own. But it's pretty easy just to turn on the TV, not even watch the speech maybe, and just listen to what the news says about it. And that's part of being an engaged and informed citizenry, and democracy, as we know, requires an engaged and informed citizenry.
Well, let's cast this into the future. When you're talking about the media, we're not going back to the era of 3 network stations and PBS. That's long gone. I remember that well, too. There was the fairness doctrine, the FCC's fairness doctrine, and so you had relatively close reads on the news by the nightly news, no matter what network you looked at. So now we have all this pigeonholed stuff, and I like to think of it as now news is like the church you go to. If you are going to a church and all of a sudden the pastor doesn't say things that conform to your beliefs, you get out of your pew, you go down the street, and you find another church that conforms more with your beliefs, right? And so maybe that's a way to think about news. But if we have this, we're going to have this huge diversity of news sources within our spectrum. So there is, into the future, what, Donna, the option of being more discriminating with your news consumption? Because we're talking about a democracy. Democracies like to elect their leaders, and then we need to be an informed citizenry. But how does that work when you can pick your own facts to support whatever notions you have?
Well, if you're cognizant of your biases, that helps. And if you seek out things that counteract those biases, and maybe it doesn't change your mind, but it does give you another point of view to consider. And so, let's talk about representation, for example. We know that back in the days when Congress was totally white men, essentially, that certain subjects in Congress didn't get talked about. When women came to the table and started to be elected representatives, then they brought to the table policy issues and subjects that the men, quite frankly, had not ever considered. And so it is important to have a diversity of views. And so very few people are nefarious in terms of their intent in that kind of regard, but they just haven't thought about, oh, well, what would it be like if I was low income and had to work 2 jobs and still had to be on food stamps? Those are the kinds of things that you have to walk a mile in somebody else's shoes, for example. And so with those biases that we have, if we understand we have them, it's part of human nature, we all have them, but we make concerted efforts to seek out information that may contradict those. And again, that doesn't mean that that necessarily changes our opinions, but that we consider those things. And maybe even then that leads us to seek out other sources and other opinions, then there's that is only good in that sense. Again, it may not change your mind, but you are a more well-rounded person in terms of considering the viewpoints. And then again, if you're a political person, you want to be a politician, you need to understand your opponent's viewpoints, and you need to understand it in a way that's not just straw man type of understanding, really to understand where that goes. And those are the politicians that are most effective in that sense. And that behooves us all to kind of think about, well, what are the other things? Do I really believe, what this person is saying and what that person is saying? And where can I go to get information that would be useful? And, one of the problems here is, and this is a really huge problem, I think, with this particular election, is that we have gotten into an age in which experts don't matter. And, scientists on climate change, they don't matter. Political scientists, they don't know anything. We trust very few people, and expertise does matter. I mean, it's really important. And so that, I think, is a particular problem in that everything is rigged and nothing is right. And that requires a little bit of calm reflection in terms of, why couldn't I trust somebody who's an expert on this area? Again, maybe I seek out some other experts. But you can't, as a citizen, know everything about everything. Even members of Congress can't know everything about everything. You have to trust experts in this sense. And I think there's a fundamental lack of trust right now in terms of that expertise. And we could say, well, look at all the people who got the polling wrong, yesterday. Many of those people were political scientists. Yeah, but polling is an art as much as it is a science, but it is important to be scientific about it. And science always makes mistakes. There's always error involved. And what are political scientists in particular trying to predict and talk about? We're trying to delve into human behavior. And human behavior, especially as related to politics, is incredibly complex. And what I think you might, as a rational individual, do, you might decide not to do for a reason that is actually irrational. And so these are problems that experts wrestle with that, we need to have a little more trust. And this goes for a lot of people, not just experts.
Mm-hmm. So many questions here, Donna. I have a few here. To get through them here in the last few minutes, I want to move at a little quicker clip because there's so many important things to pick your mind about. One of the things that was brought up in our audience before you joined us, and because you are a woman, you are a scholar of politics and a woman, we had one person here share, a teenager who didn't want to go to school, a woman. I shared of talking with a woman, a college-age woman this morning, who said she didn't think she could have kids, not biologically, but because she didn't feel there would be health care there. She didn't feel the environment would be taken care of, the planet would be taken care of. Mm-hmm. So I guess I'm asking you to speak as a scholar of politics, but also as a woman here. How do you see this election, especially considering the words that Donald Trump had for women in this election?
Yeah, I think a good word for it is reactionary. I think that there are people who are and polls even tell us this, there are some people, not a huge number of people, but there are some people who won't consider a woman as qualified to be president. I think Hillary Clinton had some of that she had to work against. And the rhetorical problem that I think we presented ourselves with, we teach our children to, in schools, this is part of school curriculum, bullying is bad. We've elected someone who has bullied people to be president. Billy Bush got fired from NBC for the whole 2005 tape with Donald Trump talking about sexual assault. Donald Trump gets elected president. It presents parents, and I'm a parent, presents us with some really important questions, but it also opens up avenues of communication, I think, in this regard that are really important. I'm a parent of 2 boys. And, my oldest didn't want to go to school today either. So it's really kind of troubling in that sense that the rhetoric has become so charged and that there didn't seem to be electoral consequences in that sense. But it's an opportunity to have another point of view present. And people have different values and different ways that they weigh things. So there were white women who voted for Trump, where the things that he had said that were fairly misogynistic didn't bother them, or maybe they even bothered them, but other things were more important than that. And as complex humans and individuals, we all have to make those decisions. And the arc of history is still positive, I think. We have steps back, but we have steps forward. And the keys to moving forward are having open communications, considering other points of view, not being reactionary, calmness prevailing. And when the founders put together the United States government, they were scholars of the Enlightenment, which was all about rationality. And they really did not like passion. If you read the Federalist Papers, anytime democracy is talked about, it's in a pejorative sense, and they didn't like passion. Why? Because that's ruled by emotion. The Enlightenment was about reason. And they structured a government to try to keep the emotion out of it. But this was an emotional election. People were driven to vote for Hillary Clinton by emotion. They were driven to vote for Donald Trump by emotion, various kinds of emotion. And that's not actually what the founders designed. They wanted rationality. And what do we have here? We don't directly elect the president. The Electoral College will not vote until mid-December.
Let me wrap a couple of questions here into one here and read this. It has to do with the Supreme Court, what you see headed, what you see happening there. Then more to the point of checks and balances, the questioner asks, we pride ourselves on having three branches of government because we have checks and balances for each branch. Now we have Congress and the presidency by Republicans, and now the Supreme Court will also be selected with a conservative Republican. How is this a check and a balance, asks the class member here.
Well, when the founders designed checks and balances, first of all, there weren't political parties. The original design of government was kind of unworkable without political parties, and political parties were instituted or kind of organically arose to kind of bridge that gap. And that's what we have happening here. But, again, elections have consequences. We pretty much know as political scientists in 2018, when the midterm elections come around, the president's party will lose seats. The exception to that rule since FDR, there's only two exceptions to that. I don't think there's any way that doesn't happen. Elections have consequences. And so and also we're in this hyper-partisan, hyper-polarized kind of era. But there are decisions that the Supreme Court makes that aren't always 5-4. And I know that kind of has seemed to be the norm, but there are things that they can't all agree on. And so we need to have, I think, a little bit of hope. And again, Donald Trump, who is he going to appoint to the Supreme Court? Now, he put a list out there at one point, but he's not necessarily a strict ideologue. And so he could throw a wild card in there. And furthermore, you can't always predict how a justice is going to behave. And so, David Souter was a huge disappointment to Republicans. He was appointed by George H.W. Bush, and he ended up not being all that conservative. And so, again, generally over the long term, American government tends to work out, but Americans get really frustrated with it because it doesn't act quickly. It wasn't designed to act quickly because they didn't want it to be reactionary. And so you have those internal checks in Congress. You have in the Senate it being an anti-majoritarian institution, and that is going to hold. Now, that may be cold comfort to people who don't like this unified nature of it, but one of the virtues of unified government is that it's easy for voters to hold the government accountable when the time comes for them to be held accountable. When we have divided government, as we have had and we have currently, which is typically the norm right now, it's hard for voters to figure out whose fault it is, and the fault generally falls to the president.
And that will go in the state level as well, since the Senate in the Iowa legislature will be in the hands of the Republicans. So at a federal level, at a state level, you will have unified leadership there. And it's hard to, if your policies fail, is it still hard to squirrel out of blaming someone else for your failures?
It is, but it again goes back to citizens paying attention and citizens understanding the consequences of policy actions, but then of the government that was elected and that does those policy actions. Because again, we have that accountability mechanism. And when you have unified government, the accountability mechanism of elections generally works pretty well if citizens pay attention.
Mm-hmm. We have a few minutes left. Another question here, just a fundamental question that needs to be answered at this time, because you mentioned also, and this happened in 2000, it's now happened in 2016, by, 200,000 votes, it seems that Hillary Clinton has won the popular vote. Why do we elect by the Electoral College instead of the popular vote?
It's part of the Constitution, and as Iowans, we should like the Electoral College. First of all, it's not going to go anywhere. It is there because it is an indirect form of election. The founders did not. The only thing that they let citizens directly elect was the House.
They didn't trust individuals.
They didn't trust individuals, and they understood that they equated democracy with mob rule. They didn't form a democracy. They formed a republic. So the Electoral College is important. In Iowa, it's really important. If you go to popular vote, you'll never see another presidential candidate in Iowa ever again. Now, that may be selfish, and you may think, well, that's not fair. Electoral systems aren't fair. There are winners and losers, regardless of the electoral system that you have. We can talk about the caucuses in the same kind of way, and Iowa being first, and that's not fair. Well, yeah, it's not fair, but it's bully for us. That's how electoral systems work. And think of this, though, the Hispanic electorate, for example, if we lumped everybody into just the popular vote, would be about 12%, and they wouldn't necessarily be a group of people who might be whose opinions might be considered by the majoritarian leaders of the parties. Being key constituencies in certain states gets their issues addressed. And the same can be said for rural people. The same can be said for any kind of group that you want to address. And so Iowa is, states are important in the sense. States have different makeups, different reasons for being, why they were formed. And they have different cultures, and the Electoral College reflects that. And you can still, even after, I'm telling you, I like the Electoral College. You can still not like it, and that's okay. But you probably ought to learn to live with it, because small states are advantaged by it too. And there are enough small states to block it, to block a constitutional amendment that would get rid of it. And so there have been proposed over the years various workarounds around the Electoral College, but they typically don't go anywhere. And it's just a weird and unique feature of American government. And again, it changes the fundamental way that you conduct a presidential election if you don't have the Electoral College. And that may be a good thing in your view. But it has definite consequences. Every electoral system has winners and has losers, and there would be some unintended effects of just simply going to the popular vote.
Mm-hmm. Here's a question that also ties into something that we discussed before you joined us, Donna. Investigating the president. We know Donald Trump promised and also Republicans promised that Hillary Clinton would have had investigations throughout her presidency from day one, and they control the House, so that could have very well been the case. Here's the question: will Trump escape his current lawsuit hearings that are scheduled? I think it's the end of November, having to do with fraud charges against Trump University, that it was not set up as a university at all, but really just a way to pull money out of people.
Yeah, certainly we know that case starts at the end of November. Now, here's an interesting thing. I'm going to throw this out to you, and don't think I'm saying this is going to happen or even that it should happen. But the Electoral College, as I mentioned, doesn't vote until mid-December. Now, it's highly unlikely that you're going to get Republican electors to switch a vote. Let's say something goes bad and we find out something really terrible about Donald Trump, and kind of there's this collective feeling that maybe he shouldn't be president. The Electoral College hasn't voted yet. It could work its way into that. Probably won't, and here's the reason why. So, we could say, and we did this in 2000, in those 5 weeks between Election Day and when that election was decided, those new-ish cable networks had 24/7 to fill, and they had a lot of people on who said, well, the people have spoken, it was clear. Al Gore won the popular vote. Some of those electors in those states that voted Republican should change their vote, and they should support the winner of the popular vote. Well, that's not going to happen, because if you know anything about how those electors are chosen, they're chosen by the political party. By the Constitution, you can't be an elected official and be an elector. And so these positions go to good and faithful members of the party. Occasionally, we have what we call those faithless electors. There are even 2 from Washington who have said previously they won't vote for Hillary Clinton. She won Washington, so we'll get to test that out. Now, that doesn't mean they'll vote for Donald Trump. But you could have, if the Republican Party wanted to kind of, monkey with this, they potentially could. Now, there are states, Iowa is not one of them, interestingly. The 6 Republican electors of Iowa who vote mid-December are totally free to vote for anybody that they want to. There's no law that binds them. There's no penalties. Some states have penalties, some have binding. There's various degrees of things here. But the Electoral College was designed to have these people, these electors, exercise independent judgment to do what was best for the good of the country. Now, again, by just putting that hypothetical out there, I'm not saying that's going to happen or even that it should happen. But it is a really, really remote possibility, but it illustrates the way the founders wanted the Electoral College to work. They didn't trust the people with this kind of decision. They did value public opinion, but they didn't value it above everything else. And they also recognized that humans were kind of self-serving. And so they tried to put in these institutional mechanisms that would keep that irrationality from working its way into the government, because they thought that was problematic. And so it's a safety valve, if you will. Now, to get back to the that case, there was a lot of discussion. As you mentioned, Hillary Clinton, her administration will be the series of congressional investigations. Trump's not going to have to face that, but he's still going to be in a different kind of system being reviewed in the court system. And there's a number of these things that are potentially burbling up. One definitely, and some other things as well. And Donald Trump himself said, that he's going to sue the women that accused him of sexual assault as well. Now, I actually don't think that would happen, because then he'd have to be deposed in those. And I don't think he probably wants to go there. And I think advisors around him will tell him that.
Here's a question, perhaps a final question. We've been so generous with your time, Donna, and let me ask this. I think it's a question, a sort of a jokey question, but behind it is a real serious. My phone is buzzing over here. I'm going to take care of that. Is it likely, asked this member of our class, the first female president will be Kim Kardashian, or a bachelorette following the new path to the president? So, of course, you see the joke in there. But 2, analysis says it was Donald Trump's celebrity status, and perhaps he has the unique celebrity status that allowed him to win the confidence of so many people after hosting The Apprentice for, I don't know how many years. We came to know him, or many Americans came to know him through The Apprentice, and liked his manner enough to trust him, right?
Yeah, so actually a different take on this question. My class asked me today about Kanye West, that he should run for president. And I said, well, he could, but he doesn't have the name recognition. He doesn't have 100% name recognition. I argue that Donald Trump basically had 100% name recognition going into this election. You might argue Kim Kardashian does as well, but I don't see that as happening. But here's what I think about, this has a larger context here. I think Donald Trump is a fundamental anomaly or outlier in this system. If you look at the asymmetric nature of this campaign, Hillary Clinton had way more money. She had more ads. She had better ground game. She had way more staff. She, based on those fundamentals, should have won this election. She obviously didn't. Why didn't she? Because Donald Trump had something, that name recognition, that he didn't need to put a lot of money, as much money as she did, out there. Now, she had good name recognition as well, but there are other factors here. So we're not going to recommend to Republicans or even Democrats now coming into Iowa for the caucuses and start campaigning for that, which I will mention would probably start in a couple of weeks. And I don't joke, Rubio came something like 11, 17 days after the 2012 election. Yes. It was for Branstad's birthday. So it'll be Democrats this time. But all joking aside, we're not going to recommend to those people, yet never mind, you don't need a ground game. You don't need to go and meet Iowa voters. That's not going to work for anybody but Trump. And Trump, quite frankly, came in second in the caucuses, and Cruz definitely beat him on the organization that was important in winning Iowa. But because of his celebrity status, he was able to parlay that into free media time, into a lot of other advantages, and then just the unique nature of the environment of this particular election, that you're not going to see another candidate like him, I would argue, at this particular period of time. Now, certainly I could be proven wrong. And celebrity culture is something that's really kind of interesting in this sense, but I really think that he's kind of an outlier in this sense, and will not see another candidate like him in our lifetimes.
Okay. Donna Hoffman, you've been super generous with your time. We're going to let you get back to your work there at the University of Northern Iowa. I'm going to turn the laptop here around so you can see the many appreciative people there for you.
Thank you all. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
What did you say?
I said thank you. It's a pleasure to talk to everyone.
Okay. Donna, we'll talk to you again on Iowa Public Radio, and hope to see you otherwise. And thank you for taking the time to be with our class today. Donna
You're
Hoffman,
welcome.
thanks. Bye.
Right.
Okay. Let's take a break, but before we do that, I have a certain sort of midway assignment for you. When we come back, let's try to have you offer what your way forward is. Now, whether you supported Donald Trump or the majority, like the majority in this classroom, did not support Donald Trump, how is this going to change you going forward? How are you going to cope here? Perhaps how are you going to talk to that neighbor who doesn't share your political views? Maybe by pulling together some of our ideas, we'll, one, feel, if you don't feel good now, feel a little better walking out of this classroom. And two, maybe there's some wisdom that will transfer to someone else in this classroom about, how we live in this great country, in this great state together, with each other, with different political views, with different fears and hopes for the future. So let's come back at 4 o'clock. Let's take a 10-minute break here, okay? Last night, and she's a quick study, yeah. Just a compliment there on our guest, Donna Hoffman there. How articulate and intelligent she is, and I have to say too, really wonderful. She was in the studio until 12 o'clock in Iowa City, and where I got to drive home at about 12:30 to my home here in Iowa City, she got to leave shortly after midnight last night to drive to Cedar Falls before she got to bed. So she's a sharp cookie, even with 3 hours of sleep. So we're very appreciative of that. Okay, what I wanted to do right now is to we had our class assignment here, two things, and then a little bit. If you had whatever you had to offer, that's going to determine when we get out of here. Your last assignment is to take what we have, and whether you think that's a silk purse or a sow's ear, to kind of mix a metaphor. Whatever you think those results are, how are you going to go forward with them? With your friends, with your people in your community, with maybe your political activism. But first, I wanted to mention, this is my email. I'll have this for a while. I think I'll keep it up there too. Just a little pitch for Iowa Public Radio. I think you probably heard, how many public radio listeners are there here? Okay, wonderful. Very good. Perhaps you had heard in our last pledge campaign that we had what we call testimonials. I am John. I'm a baker. I've done this, and I am a public radio supporter. Okay, this is kind of a new thing, and I think very effective that we meet people in the community. It's very short and very painless. If you have any interest in perhaps, and we have a way to do this. We can coach you, and we come up with just certain phrases. Not coach you to say something that's not genuine. What was that laugh about? Come on. If there's anything that public radio is, we're transparent, okay? So we would take your profession, and we would decide on a few key phrases about who you are. And of course, that last phrase is, I am also an Iowa Public Radio supporter. If you are interested in being considered for that, write me here, okay, with your contact information. I'll stop right there and say that. So we had last week the homework to guess the Electoral College outcome of this election. And it won't be any surprise to tell you that you all failed miserably. D's and F's in the class. But so did our pollsters and prognosticators on cable television, and they get a lot of money for that. They failed big time, and you were just asked to what's that? Yes, fire them. They're fired. So as I said, no one is going to, so you're going to guess, I said no one, if someone gets the exact electoral vote outcome, they are the winner. Otherwise, we're going to play it like horseshoes, the people who are close. Well, if you're playing horseshoes in your backyard, I'm just going to take that. The closest the horseshoe got to the stake in this case was in the next yard. That's how it's like. You went like this and went, It was a Laurel and Hardy thing. You didn't hit the neighbor kid who was playing out in his backyard with that iron horseshoe. Don't worry about that. You're all way so off, right? So what we have, actually, going by my word, the closest people were having Clinton win by the thinnest of margins, which would be James Fuller. Is he here? James Fuller. He had Clinton winning with 274 to Trump 265. Congratulations, James. Right on his heels, we're going to have 4 winners here because you're all in the 200s, actually. All the others picked Clinton by winning with electoral votes in the 300s. Donna Young, are you here? Donna, congratulations at 275 electoral votes, right? And Gordon Goldsmith. Gordon, 278 electoral votes. Congratulations, all bunched up there. And then we had Heidi Galler. Heidi, right there. Gut gemacht, Heidi. 295, just below 300. So for each of you as winners, I have an IPR mug and an Iowa Public Radio CD that is I also host and created Java Blend, and that's a collection of music from Iowa, mostly Iowa artists that we put in a compilation a few years ago. So a round of applause for our winners. For the rest of you, losers, you knew that was going to come, right? Iowa Public Radio pens as consolation prizes, and we have some of these static clings that you can put on a window as well, okay? So that everybody comes away. I hope everybody comes away with something here. So let's tackle this. Whatever you feel about the outcome of the election, what are you going to do? How are you going to think about that? How are you going to go away from here and help the community go forward from here, given what's going on? Who wants to offer up something? What's that? Wait for Canada's website. That's right. The gentleman back there is referring to the fact that Canada's immigration website crashed very early this morning. And I think there were a lot of celebrities who said, if it goes this way, I will move out of the country. We will see if they keep their promises. I don't know. Are we going to lose Bruce Springsteen? Is he going to move to Canada? Anybody want to offer a view here? Okay. Yeah, Donna here. Well, let's get to a microphone to you, and maybe you'll spur others to share their thoughts.
I'm thinking of not going to my family Thanksgiving.
Right. We laugh. We laugh, but you're the third person I've heard that from in less than 24 hours, is I cannot visit those people anymore. You bring all the pies. They should have thought about that before they voted, shouldn't they? Okay.
I was just going to say, I think today's program gives everybody hope to kind of look forward to see what happens.
Yeah, how so? What gave you hope about what we talked about?
Well, I really enjoyed your speaker. I thought she
Donna
was
Hoffman, she's wonderful.
outstanding. I've never heard her talk before, and I thought it was very interesting. And the other thing that I think it was maybe Monday on the Iowa Public Television Radio, On Point.
Yes.
And Tom, and I can't remember his last name, Ashman, right?
Ashbrook, yeah.
Ashbrook. And he had a program that took dialogues from previous elections back to Jefferson and Adams and how vitriolic it was. And
Yes.
awful. And I was just amazed. I hadn't heard all of these. So you kind of went, well, this wasn't great, but we survived.
Right, and this country, perhaps not in our living memories, but this country has been there before.
And I just had kind of forgot. I knew there were conflicts, but he really brought it to a head. It was interesting.
What about the conflict that we're overlooking, perhaps, where 600,000 Americans were killed by other Americans?
Yes, Civil War.
The Civil War. So, yeah, we have been to a place the Republic has survived and will survive this.
Well, you know, I really disliked George Bush, commonly called Shrub. And I thought he was really dumb. And I kept telling myself that we would get through it. And doggone, we were getting through it. And then he got us in this war, and we are still there. So sometimes patience doesn't work either.
Okay, there's an observation. Well, it's interesting to think. We're sitting here in Johnson County in Coralville, one of the most liberal counties in the state. So let's go back 4 years or 8 years to when Barack Obama was elected and then reelected. Let's go to a different county. Let's go to Northwest Iowa, or maybe your relatives are, I don't know, and say, well, they had the heartache, they had the gut ache, they had the worries and the fears when Barack Obama was elected twice. Don't believe that. You need to talk with some people who are not in your.
They were upset because he was black.
No. Okay. We can debate that, but I'm just saying the reaction that you had today, that some of you had, wanting to cry, wanting to throw up, wanting to, have this not be true. Other people have experienced it in other elections. So, yes, sir, go ahead.
Well, how I'm going to get through this is I want to see what Trump's going to do with those Republicans who came out against him. I think that's a circus that hasn't started yet.
Right. That will be interesting. The never-Trumpers out there. And we know Donald Trump based on he rewards loyalty and he punishes disloyalty. And another thing that Barack Obama said that we'll have to watch for here too, and he made this as a campaign pitch. He said, becoming the president does not moderate your personality. It magnifies your personality. We'll see if that's true. It may not be true. Okay. How are we going to, those of us in this room, get through it, whether we agreed or disagreed with the election results? The question here is, at the end of our last session, what do we do with it? How would we go forward? Go ahead.
I'm just going to accept it and see what happens. There have been a lot of presidents I haven't especially liked in the past. We have a family dinner the weekend before Thanksgiving with a lot of cousins there. The hard part's not going to be that they're Republicans, they're Nebraska fans.
Anybody else? Yeah, we'll go to you and then to you. Mm-hmm.
I'll speak for Northwest Iowa, which is where I grew up. I've been in Iowa City for 40 years now. However, I certainly am a much more moderate Republican than Northwest Iowa and some of my relatives. I was very interested in the first part of our program today with how you were getting everybody to talk about how they felt. And then ask a Republican, basically, to please speak up. We had one woman who did, who was immediately attacked with a lot of voices around this room, and I'm thinking, that's bullying, as we heard a bullying comment over here earlier in the whole thing. And it's like, going forward, I want to be able to, yes, enjoy that I have a Republican Congress and president. I can't say that I didn't hold my nose sometimes with things that came out of his mouth. But if this is going to be an attack every time that a Republican said, this is a good thing, and it doesn't meet, quotes, the standards of the Democratic Party, we're not going to get together. So we've got to not jump in there and make you wrong before you can have that conversation. And it worries me particularly, I'll say what they call it in Northwest Iowa, the Republic of Johnson County. When you live here and you cannot speak and get the respect of them to even listen.
Great comment. Thank you. Thank you for offering that.
See, I think the kind of decision we have to make, and the discussion just now brings it up, is those of us who are liberals, or even worse, have to decide whether we're going to say the first day Congress comes in session, our goal is to defeat Trump, even at the harm to the country, or whether we're going to try to cooperate. And I think of writing a letter to our one Democratic representative and saying to him, I want you to not cooperate with Trump on anything, which is kind of what I think we've had for some time now, or I want you to work for the good of the country. And it's a tough decision to make. It really is.
Interesting. Yeah. What will be the position? What will you encourage your representative to do? To block everything? To get in sort of what you would see as damage control mode? Or to have an open mind?
One of the things that bothers me the most about Trump and a lot of the thinking in the Republican Party is that they seem to have no love or consideration for the people in our country who are without any kind of power, who are struggling to just eat, let alone go to school, get a job. I work at the free medical clinic, and I deal with a lot of these people, and these are good people, and they want to do well. And yet, in our state, in our nation, I've seen with the Republican government how any kind of help and understanding and caring for these people has been destroyed. And I'm very fearful that this will continue. So that's one of the reasons why when someone like Donald Trump makes the comments that he makes in public to the entire world about some of these very less fortunate people, I'm very concerned and worried about what will happen with these people, especially with the thinking of the Republicans who elected Trump.
What's that? You know, here's a specific thing I would say and throw out. We have plenty of in Johnson County, considering the rhetoric against immigrants. Why not go out and make a friend find a friend who is perhaps a Muslim? Would that be something? If you don't already have one, I'm glad you do already. Yeah. Jennifer, you've got the microphone right there.
I would be curious to find out what's going to happen to Merrick Garland. You know, they've been holding off on this guy. He is apparently a highly talented, perfectly qualified person to appoint to the Supreme Court. And I've been watching Senator Grassley because it bothered me that he would hold off for political reasons putting his name in for the Supreme Court. I have heard diddly squat from them since the election, and I still have no answer to what his future will be. But I would like to see him appointed to the Supreme Court before the end of the term.
Well, the Republicans still have control of the Senate. I don't think that'll happen. But I had a little thought here, too. Highly unlikely. I didn't hear it anywhere. But what if the olive branch that Donald Trump reaches out with is to say, you know, Merrick Garland, he's a moderate. Let's put him to a vote.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, dream on. Yes, dream on.
Well, this class has really helped me calm down.
I'm glad to hear that.
I came in really sad and somewhat angry. And I'm thinking about my 8-year-old grandson in Chicago who said to his mother this morning, how did this happen? And so I'm going to take away from this, I have another 8-year-old in North Carolina, to try and talk to those boys and give them some historical perspective about Herbert Hoover and even farther back. I'm not a political activist, but that's what I'm taking away from this.
That's a wonderful way to go forward. Thanks. Any other thoughts to share before we close here? Down here, Sandra, in our first row.
I was struck when Hillary spoke today and said, we the people cannot just come to an election every 4 years, that we must take those things that are the causes and the things that are important to us, and we must be active in relation to those on a regular basis, to be alert and to speak out and to do our political duty the other several years between elections. So that will be a challenge for some of those of us who have not been as politically active as others in this room. I mean, I know there are politically active people because I will go to events and I will see that they have been out and they have been active and they have been organizers. So I think if all of us who have these strong feelings will act, then we might see some other change.
Other remarks? Anybody else? Okay, I think we've come to the end of this. Again, we have some things from Iowa Public Radio there. The prize winners, please come up. I'm glad you're all four here today to bring up to get your grand prizes, even though you threw the horseshoe in the neighbor's yard. What a deal. I just want to say, it was true when Bee contacted me, I had trepidation about doing this. I was thinking, what could I have to say to so many people with so much experience? And I have learned a lot from you, and my joy has been in speaking with you and bringing a few things forward. So it's been my complete pleasure to be with you these last 4 sessions. Thank you for allowing me to do that.